Hello, how are you today? Ready to explore a list of books that might just surprise you? Some could become your next favorites, others you might skip. Let's see what readers are saying and which titles are worth your time.
The Wedding People is next, and Brady Lockerby's take got a lot of love, 1626 likes, to be exact. Curious? Let's hear it. Okay, so it took me a minute to get into this one and I was so afraid I wouldn't like it, but I loved it. I don't know how a book with such heavy subject matter also happens to be laugh out loud funny, but I just adored every second of this and didn't want it to end loudly crying.
Let's take a look at Same As It Ever Was. Liz Hines' comment, which got 266 likes, might give us a clue why it stood out. And I'm sobbing. Lombardo has absolutely done it again. Same As It Ever Was is another breathtakingly observant family drama centering on a marriage ripe with years together, children to care for into adulthood and secrets. Not thriller-esque secrets but rather the ones that permeate most suburbs yet are very rarely explored nor revealed. I'm not saying every family will relate to the exact situations/secrets in this book, but I'm certain most will relate to something here. Lombardo has a very specific way of exposing the universality of imperfections, and takes us deeper into the motivations of characters than most. So much so I didn't want to leave these characters even after 500 pages. I'm absolutely bereft.
Now let's move on to Tell Me Everything. Let's see what Shelley's book Nook, whose comment received 439 likes, had to say. I don't know what it is about Elizabeth Strout's writing that always captures me. Maybe it's because it is about ordinary life written in such an extraordinary way. There's so much sadness in this book: sexual child assault, murder, suicide, aging, cancer and death. But for some reason that's not what I focused on. I'm a pessimist at heart, but the way Elizabeth Strout writes had me noticing the love, laughter, friendships and joy more than anything else. There's a bit of a mystery in this one as well, when the dead body of a resident shows up in a car crashed in the quarry. But the focus isn't really on solving the murder as much as why it happened in the first place, and that was very refreshing. This book is very character-driven, so there really wasn't a plot per se. Don't try to find meaning in this series. This is book 5, it's just about unrecorded simple lives. It's about the little things that matter and not the big picture. As Benjamin Franklin said, what I reflected on while reading this was, don't take life too seriously and enjoy the little things while you can. As my English friend Morning always says, bloody brilliant. All the stars. Thank you to NetGalley and the publisher for the advance reader's copy.
Here comes Greta and Valdin. And guess what? Emma's hot take scored 621 likes. Let's read it. I love a cool girl book. This book only has 2 flaws. It has 930 characters and all of them fall under the same family tree, and 78% of their names start with G and 2 of them are Greta, and it is genuinely impossible to keep them straight even if you dramatically flip back to the beginning multiple times. And it has 2 perspectives and they're identical, as in the characters have nearly the same voice, but in a way that's a pro for me. BC, I don't like books with multiple POVs. So logic follows that if you absolutely must have more than one point of view, you can at least do the respectful thing, for me specifically, and make them in alternate chapters that sound exactly the same. Otherwise, this is perfect. So funny, no plot, just vibes, memorable characters, filled with jokes and generational humor and pop culture references without being annoying. Of course, I didn't love when the book's final pages descended into tons of points of view, because I don't like that at the best of times, and also I couldn't remember anyone's relationship to one another, but I would have read the first 200 pages of this book for 930 pages. I never expected to get living with a beloved sibling, and knowing that it will end soon because you're both in love and wanting that and not wanting that, and being heartbroken and happy at once. Representation. So, what a treat to receive it. For this, I give it a proverbial kiss on the forehead and 4.5 stars. Bottom line, kiss, thanks to the publisher for the copy.
Next up is Playground. Here's what Tawfiq Eve had to say. Her comment got 264 likes. This novel totally shows off. Signature style. Mixing deep emotional moments with sharp takes on current events, and a really cool look at how humans and nature connect. Honestly, it deserves a spot on the shortlist for the 2024 Booker Prize. At its core, the book is all about protecting the environment, with a big focus on the ocean. But unlike his earlier works, which were all about the battle between destruction and preservation, follows Evie, a marine scientist, as she endlessly explores the ocean and marvels at its wonders. Paints the underwater world so beautifully. Every creature comes off as innocent, charming, and mysteriously wise. Once you've seen the magic of the deep, it's hard to forget. Then there's Todd, another main character who dives into today's hot topics like AI and social networks. His story and his connection with Rufi brings out a bittersweet vibe about loneliness, friendship, and where things ultimately lead. Todd's crew of tech geniuses have whipped up AI and social platforms that seem to have taken on a life of their own, maybe even in a bid to create a never-ending perfect game. The book's playground is this multi-layered world. Todd's social platform, the ocean seen through Evie's eyes with its countless swimming creatures, the evolving friendship between Todd and Rufi, and even Ina's artistic universe. But bit by bit, everything starts to fall apart. The ocean suffers from human actions taken in the name of progress, and though we don't know exactly what price we'll pay, it's clear that true harmony between humans and nature is slipping away. That leads to a radical new path, one where AI starts pushing boundaries. Still, the roles of who's in control and who isn't remain up in the air. A storytelling pulls you right into these heavy themes. With multiple narrative perspectives bouncing between different times and places, you quickly get a feel for each character and their intertwined stories. After just a few chapters, you're pretty confident you've got the plot figured out. But then, I was totally caught off guard. I'd assumed the I narration was just talking to us, the readers, and that the third-person sections were simply there to tell different characters' stories. So when an important twist hit in the second-to-last chapter, I was nearly floored. Turns out, Okenaries had set up this entire playground, where readers are actually cast as a super-evolved, all-knowing AI, one that's picked up on every story and has the power to rebuild a world where the lost can come back. All those third-person bits? They were stories I was feeding Todd, drawing him into a new game of reunions and farewells. Everything is reset in an instant, and it's never too late to change course. It's a brilliant twist that pulls you deep into this ocean of fiction, stirring up both sadness and awe. At that moment, nails it, showing off the wild possibilities and potential terrors of AI. Whether it's a trick or a miracle, it all depends on how you look at it. A fun little detail is in the dedication, where writes to Reilly, 750,000 thanks to you, better yet, let's make it 1 million. I was stumped until I noticed those same numbers popping up throughout the book. Life 50. Life 50. Yeah, that's the playground. Life 50. 4. 6/5 stars.
We now turn to the mighty Red. Ron Charles, whose comment garnered 277 likes, shared the following opinion. After reading more than a dozen powerful novels by Louise Erdrich, I venture into each of her new books braced for heartbreak. And yet I still find myself falling through comic trapdoors hidden under the carpet of her prose. Really, I should know better by now. This Native American author who has won practically every literary honor our country can bestow, including a Pulitzer Prize and a National Book Award, flexes through an emotional range that most writers would never dare attempt. Yes, there are books like Shadow Tag that present such adamantine despair that no splinter of mirth can worm in, but typically, even when confronting great suffering, her work is buoyed with scenes of striking levity. In Erdrich's latest novel, The Mighty Red, humor and sorrow are fused together like twined tree trunks that keep each other standing. The story begins in 2008 within a farming community in North Dakota's Red River Valley. The Great Recession is biting hard. Everything here that still runs on sugar beets, planting them, harvesting them, trucking them, processing them. The industry has bent the whole town around the pursuit of that ubiquitous sweetener, with bitter results. The soil is so exhausted that only a conspiracy of toxic chemicals and genetically modified seeds can keep these zombie fields ambling along. The wives know what's going wrong. At their book club, one of them says the wasteland Cormac McCarthy foresees in The Road needn't come from an atomic bomb or a well-aimed asteroid, just keep poisoning the ground. Although Crystal Frechette hauls sugar beets for a living, she has more immediate worries than environmental collapse. During her 12-hour shifts on the highway, she can't stop worrying about her daughter, Kismet. Once regarded as a strange goth girl who endured the cool kids' derision, at 18 Kismet is suddenly hot, even though she still might wear, say, a cap-sleeved black 1950s cocktail dress and a boa of iridescent black rooster feathers, from the thrift store.
Let's take a look at all fours. Talia Hart's comment, which got 1744 likes, might give us a clue why it stood out. Okay, I'm going to type this out in a way that I hope that people will understand. I absolutely believe that there should be more literature about women discussing and exploring their beliefs on motherhood, sex, their bodies, gender, etc. That is a no-brainer in my opinion, and it is literature that must be supported, as middle-aged women are often silenced. With that out of the way, it would be great if I could read a book by a well-known female author who wasn't under the impression that descriptions of cutting matted hair from a dog's ass or running her hands under her lover's pee was original, sharp, or illuminating writing. I am so bored of this type of lit fic that equates disgusting bodily fluid/acts as provocative and therefore interesting writing. It isn't. And if you are willing to go there, then at least make a goddamn point that's better explored and more nuanced than shoving my hand up our dog's ass, was how my husband and I reunited our connection. Also, I am sick and tired of the theme that opening up your relationship/going poly means that you are more mature, intelligent, and sophisticated than another. I really don't understand how we got to this stage of believing that monogamy equals immaturity/naivete, and being poly equals maturity/wisdom. I was looking for a introspective story about a middle-aged woman, road trips, change, and an examination of all types of relationships. What I received was the most generic, millennial, ChatGPT-coded book that literally believes that discussing gross things makes the content refreshing/intelligent/good, and that after a failed solo cross-country trip, the solution to fix or reconnect with your partner is opening up your marriage. Nothing about this book read as tender. It was written in a way that was so narcissistic and self-centered, so boring, so typical, so predictable. The half-star is for the one paragraph that I loved, where the narrator leaves her house for her road trip and feels as if she isn't far enough to start listening to podcasts, music, etc. That was breathtaking writing.
Alright, let's check out colored television. Here's what Yun said. Her comment got 472 likes. I really wanted to love this book. But at the end of the day, it's hard to love something you don't really understand. Let me start with what I enjoyed. Lai Bolbayala Fola Kavan Bolbayala was interesting and unusual, and because I've never read anything like it, it fully engaged my brain. It constantly tried to explore so many meaningful topics that it often felt like every sentence and every paragraph had the potential to be something profound. Every time I sat down with this book, I didn't want to put it down. I wanted to keep going, to keep turning the pages. There was this perpetual feeling that something compelling was right around the corner, if only I could stick around for a few more pages to find out what it was. But the problem is that the compelling bits never really emerged. This story had the anticipation and the tension, but not the payoff. The whole thing felt like a setup instead of a story with a beginning, middle, and end. The same could be said for the would-be interesting explorations. It feels like a lot of great ideas were introduced, but then nothing came of them. Yes, the book made me think, but that's because it served up ideas without any follow-through, so I was forced to come up with stuff myself or just leave the ideas dangling. As a result, while the book may have arrested my attention, it didn't actually give me anything new I could take away with me. Let me give an example. It's clear Jane suffered from envy and wanted an upper-middle-class life. But neither she nor her husband were willing to give up their high-minded artistic pursuits in trade for a job that would make more money. In fact, they regarded everyone who did as sellouts and were bitterly against them. Okay, but so what? I understand, as I'm sure everyone does, the conundrum of either working a well-paid but soulless job versus pursuing your passions but making considerably less, so I didn't understand what this story was trying to add to that conversation. Another example is Finn, Jane and Lenny's son. He has possibly special needs, but they're not sure. Jane and Lenny have different parenting views on what this could mean. Okay, but so what? I'm pretty sure every set of parents have had differing views at one point or another regarding their child, special needs or not. Again here, I feel like the author is trying to say something, but what it is eludes me. Gay Karens. Maybe part of the issue is the characters. Jane was not really sympathetic, and neither were any of the supporting characters. They all just seemed to muddle along, blissfully certain in their views of the world, while being bitterly against everyone who doesn't share them. From beginning to end, it seemed like there were no character growth, no gained understanding from their experiences. Or maybe the problem is that this is billed as a dark comedy, but I didn't see any humor. It's not that I read potentially funny passages and just didn't laugh because it wasn't my brand of humor. No, it's more that I didn't even understand where the humor could be. Instead, this story felt earnest throughout, almost overly so, and thus I had to take everything it said seriously. I suspect if I'd understood the humor, this probably would have read like a completely different story to me. Or if it hadn't come across so shallowly traversed, as I always prefer more depth than breadth. But as it stands, I can't shake the feeling that I didn't quite get this story. Still, I really enjoyed Senna's writing and will check out more from her. Hopefully my next foray will be more successful. Tilde.
Curious about Sandwich? Let's hear from Stacey B. Her opinion earned 981 likes for a reason. I am the exact target audience for this book. I'm 54 years old menopausal woman with 2 grown children who spends lots of time in Sandwich Ma. But this book just did not do it for me. I was annoyed at the places in Sandwich were completely fictional. Not that real names of places needed to be used, but it's what makes it fun for locals to read, and they did not describe places that actually exist. And a huge pet peeve is the audio narrator, who did do a fantastic job otherwise, pronounce Barnstable wrong. It's more like Barnstable, not Barnstable, like horse barn, and if I were the author I would demand that be fixed. But besides those personal pet peeves, I just found the relationships with her children a little too open, and there were also comments made that were really over the top, like for shock value, and I am far from a pearl clutcher, but a lot of these seemed really unnecessarily crude. As for Rocky, the main character, I will say she made me thankful my menopause experience isn't as bad as hers. She is one angry woman on the verge of exploding at any and all times. I almost want to have my husband read it so he knows how lucky he is. Lol, this woman's husband is a friggin' saint. To go with the flow as much as he does. And although I, as well as many moms, get sentimental about their kids and missing the younger days, she really goes over the top almost to point where it's creepy. I did enjoy the ending and it put a lump in my throat, but overall, it just didn't hit the mark for me as a fun beach read.
Real Americans is next, and Yun's take got a lot of love. 1348 likes to be exact. Curious? Let's hear it. How do you rate a book that doesn't quite deliver on its promise, and yet is still a riveting read? Told through the perspectives of 3 generations of a family. Come to Thelafe Lotami Mars Helos. Shruthi Kafkijas Lunacol Saar follows Lily, as she finds the love of her life, Nick through his high school and college days as he gains independence, and May in her old age as she recounts what really happened all those years ago. Of the 3 accounts, I feel like Lily's and Nick's boil down to coming-of-age stories, no matter how you try couch it, in fancier, more racially interesting terms. And I think that's where my mismatched expectations resulted in some disappointment. I was expecting more of a deep dive into what it means to grow up Chinese American, but this only just scratches the surface. The book tries to tackle so many worthwhile subjects: what it means to belong, a mother's love and expectations for her child, immigration and assimilation, having wealth and privilege, affirmative action, racism. You name it, it feels like it's in this book. If you're thinking to yourself, wow, that's a lot, yes it is. And maybe that's the problem. Corporaverorhul. With so many topics, how do you achieve a meaningful look into any one of them? Well, I'm not sure you can. You can only superficially acknowledge them for a few pages, or even just a paragraph here and there, and that's about it. Every time I came across an interesting observation, I'd get excited, only to have the book immediately abandon it and move on to the next thing. Throughout the whole story, there is this feeling that the good part is coming, and I'm imminently about to stumble upon it. And this feeling propelled me through the book. I kept turning the pages, waiting with anticipation at what were sure to be astonishing revelations. But they never really materialized to my satisfaction. I did find May's portion to be the most interesting and compelling. Hers was more than just a coming-of-age tale. She talks about what it's like to grow up during the Cultural Revolution, At a time of famine, when neighbor turned on neighbor, and every sort of intellectual aspiration was viewed as a punishable offense. I can't help but be drawn towards this part of Chinese history. It was the defining event of my parents' youth, yet they hardly ever talk about it. The other interesting part of May's tale is the focus on the science that is central to this book, especially the ethics of gene editing and selection. But here again, it feels like the story got just close enough to tantalize, then immediately backed off, as if afraid to take anything other than a superficial stance on a potentially controversial topic. I did want to mention the writing style. It came across as rather choppy at first, with lots of random observations and intense bursts of information, all the while keeping the reader at arm's length emotionally. It was a bit jarring initially, but then I hardly noticed any more after a few chapters, so either I acclimated to it, or the writing smoothed out. Either way, if you're having trouble at the start, don't let it prevent you from going a little further. Mamen neka bawi mehi for metasis. Mamemehi says. Amamehi, fideralai mehi, shawi mehi, lena, chasai Emehi commettable spakajai, lenahehi, sapavai howie metabawi mehi howie manaya. I could feel the potential. There was this electric buzz that at any moment this was going to become an amazing read. And it almost got there, but then somehow it didn't. Underneath this riveting story there is a missed opportunity to really say something new and insightful about a host of worthwhile topics. Instead, this book skirts around them, giving brief nods to all but never more than that. Tilde 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 tilde.
Alright, let's check out Margo's Got Money Troubles. Here's what Emma said. Her comment got 618 likes. In this economy? This rocked beyond my wildest guesses. So quirky, so funny, so one of a kind. Everything these weirdo characters did was unpredictable, and yet somehow, they felt so real. And I cared about them, and their relationships and their bizarre plans. I will say the thing that keeps this from a 5-star is the fact that the baby at the core of the plot mostly feels like some sort of nearby puppet, in that his name is mentioned a lot, but I don't really get his vibe. But that's fine too. I just have baby fever of the literary variety. I can't explain it either. Bottom line. My first book by this author, and now I have to read them all. 4.5 thanks to the publisher for the e-arc.
Alright. Let's check out good material. Here's what Alyssa Trigg said. Her comment got 2,571 likes. Being stuck inside the head of a 35-year-old man with the emotional bandwidth of a teaspoon is truly the seventh circle of hell. I liked every single character in this book better than I liked Andy. Alas, his character was a clever satire that captures the zeitgeist of our current male dating pool. I was constantly infuriated by him, and I was refreshed to finally read the last chapter in Jen's perspective. Reading Jen's chapter was like reading thoughts scooped out of my own brain, and Alderton deeply understands the liberation of being a woman satisfied with her own identity, who views romantic relationships as add-ons to life rather than necessities.
We now turn to Martyr. Jack Edwards, whose comment garnered 2,885 likes, shared the following opinion. Martyr is the kind of book you never forget reading. I wish I could wipe my brain clean and read it again for the first time. But, then again, I'm also grateful to now be equipped with the vocabulary to explain big philosophical ideas in palatable ways. This book carefully considers themes of grief, martyrdom, sobriety, addiction, family, apathy, social, cultural identity, and so much more. It's hard to explain the plot or even the structure, which is marvelously fluid, but I think that's the beauty of it. Ultimately, it's a book about morality and mortality, following an Iranian man whose parents have both died, one in a plane crash, one by subsequent suicide, negotiating the concept of death. He hears about an artist in Brooklyn who is spending her final days. She has been diagnosed with cancer, sitting in a museum and talking to visitors about anything they choose, and decides he'd appreciate her company. While this book contemplates big ideas, Kaveh Akbar also isn't shy about confessing that sometimes we don't know the answer. Sometimes there is no straightforward solution or explanation. That's part of the human experience too, this not knowing. What I do know is that this book was an easy 5-star read, and one I'll be returning to again and again and again. Here one moment stirred some reactions. Brady Lockerby's comment, which got 656 likes, might just explain why OMG I loved this one. Listened to like 80% of it on audio and the audiobook was so well done. Reminded me of The Measure at times, kind of a similar storyline where one woman on a plane starts predicting other passengers' causes a death and if spirals out from there. A lot of storylines going on at once, but it was wrapped up so perfectly in the end. I fell in love with the oddball main character Cherry, such a fun read.
Next up, Wandering Stars. Roxanne dropped a comment that 544 people couldn't help but like. Let's see what she said. Orange has such a unique narrative voice, and it is on full display in his sophomore novel. Wandering Stars is sprawling and polyphonic and original. It is a prequel and sequel to There, Sure, but it's also a book that stands on its own. A lot to admire here. And I can't wait to see what Orange does next.
I hope this finds you well stirred some reactions. Emma's comment, which got 940 likes, might just explain why. Emails never find me well. I expected this to be a sarcastic, dry, funny, edgy book. Instead it is a kind, sweet, corny, kinda cringy, occasionally funny book. And it turns out I'll take that trade. I caught myself teary-eyed at the nice moments at the end of this, and even if it felt unrealistic and a bit much in parts, it's also the book kind of therapy where everything starts bad and then ends magically. So I'll take it. Bottom line, feeling, well. Thanks to the publisher for the e-arc.
Swan's song stirred some reactions. Yun's comment, which got 381 likes, might just explain why. Elin Hilderbrand's final Nantucket novel feels like both a fond farewell to her book franchise, as well as a love letter to the island that is her cherished home. Chief of Police Ed Kapanesh is set to retire. But before he does, he has to get through one more summer in Nantucket. Of course, there's no chance of smooth sailing. Trouble arrives soon, in the form of a new couple who comes to town, and they immediately take the island by storm, stirring up all sorts of drama and intrigue. What is it that makes Elin Hilderbrand's books so irresistible? Is it her plot, or her characters? Or is it that Nantucket is an aspirational place for most of us, filled with seemingly wealthy and beautiful people, with nothing better to do than soak up the sun and stir up drama? So to step into these stories feels like a break from normal life, a vacation of sorts. Or even better, a staycation without the hassle of having to leave the comfort of one's couch. And Hilderbrand definitely understands and plays that up. Her stories always have that light, playful, conspiratorial tone, inviting the reader into the exclusive lives of these Nantucket elites. She never takes the stories and the characters too seriously, and the result is the perfect dose of fun and escapism. Hilderbrand lives on Nantucket year-round, and knows the island inside and out, and you can feel that in her stories. All the local restaurants and beaches and gathering places she includes adds so much authenticity and charm to the whole thing, and it makes you want to visit Nantucket. In fact, now that Hilderbrand is done writing Nantucket stories, maybe their tourism board can just scoop her up, since she's pretty much already doing that job. One thing to note is that the blurb makes this seem like a mystery, but it isn't really. Coco disappears off of a boat, and we alternate between the police trying to figure out what happened, and the events leading up to it. But that's rather misleading, because it implies there are suspects and motives and clues, not to mention a denouement that explains it all. But none of that really happened here. So just make sure you don't have the wrong expectations going in. Succeed. The other thing worth mentioning is that I didn't really like any of the main characters. Now that isn't necessarily a deal breaker for me, but in this case, I feel like I could have connected with the story just a little bit more if I did. Initially, Coco and Casey were both interesting, but then as the story went on, they started to annoy me a bit with their inability to communicate and make good decisions. In other words, they were both rather immature, and then you add in the Richardsons, and at times, this felt like a story about a bunch of teenagers rather than adults. But that is a small quibble since I obviously had a lot of fun with it. But Chiwei Samena time. Oh, one last thing. This is marked as part of a series, though I've only read one other book in it. I neither felt like I was missing out on the ones I haven't read, nor did I feel like the one I did read contributed anything substantial to this. The books in the series share some similar characters as they take place in the same Nantucket universe. But it isn't necessary to read all of them, or even one, prior, in order to maximally enjoy this one. There's definitely a bittersweet feel to this final book. But fortunately for me, I am rather late to the Elin Hilderbrand party. I only discovered her a few years ago, though she has written 30 books. So even though she may be done with Nantucket, I still have many more of her books to go, before I have to call it quits. Tilde 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 tilde. Tilde 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 tilde.
Here comes Blue Sisters, and guess what? Jack Edwards' hot take scored 3,291 likes. Let's read it. I knew this was going to be a 5-star read from the very first paragraph, and it somehow just got better and better. Gorgeous writing with meticulous attention to detail. Characters so real, they walk off the page. Dialogue so believable, you forget there's a page between you and the characters talking. Coco Mellors, you've done it again, but somehow even better.
Next up is Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong bookshop. Here's what JH had to say. Her comment got 1913 likes. In Korea, this book's genre is described as healing fiction, which contrasts to the Western fictions, book you cannot put down, speed that often is required to reach the bestsellers list. This book intentionally slows down time in its short chapters that reads from various characters' views. It's not a book to be enjoyed on the tube journey to work, as the book requires peace and space to enjoy fully. But instead, I recommend this as an excellent warming evening book with a cup of tea. Similar to I Want to Die But I Want to Eat Tteokbokki, that enjoys popularity outside of Korea but relatively unknown in Seoul, this book also isn't a bestseller in the traditional lists in Korea, although currently rising in ranks. I wonder whether the reason is its subject matter. It gently pokes at culturally difficult subjects: divorce, cutting ties with family, quitting a successful job that pays well, etc. While these are elements that are accepted in Western countries, and even welcomed in this generation, I hope readers start this book understanding just how harshly judged these subjects still are in Korea. This is a beautiful book portraying how much depth and courage is required from anyone who ventures out on her own speed and direction in a society that celebrates uniformity. It's a book that reminds us it's okay to slow down and find your own unique path.
Time for intermezzo. Let's see why Emma's comment, with 2,964 likes, stood out. This book was the most exciting news of my year, and I got engaged the week it was announced. Somehow, it still exceeded my life-altering, world-centering, unrealistic to the point of being annoying expectations. With every book, Sally Rooney seems to challenge herself in a new way, showing that in the years since her last release, while we've all been pining and watching Paul Mescal fan edits, she's been ever, somehow, still building on her craft. In Beautiful World, Where Are You, for example, she displayed a totally new and mesmerizing use of visual language and natural motif that I fell in love with. Here, her use of perspective is stunning. I'm a multi-POV hater, but this manages to feel like something entirely different even as it follows the interiority of 3 characters. It seamlessly transitions between the 3 while still being vividly distinct: Peter's staccato trains of thought, Margaret's quiet self-reflection, Ivan's anxious rambling. I've never read anything like it. Decisions like the little we see from within the 2 female characters in Peter's orbit and are immersed in the world of Ivan's feel so true to their characters and to their stories, and such an interesting facet to the characteristic socio-political explorations that are the true gem of Rooney's writing. Rooney also challenges herself to create characters who are simultaneously unlikable and real, making decisions that threaten to get you to put the book down and sigh while being mercilessly relatable and easy to understand. That's what we're working with here. A novel in which every choice is so thoughtful that you can spend a minute reading a page, then pause for 5 minutes just to consider it. Which is basically what I did: make myself spend a month reading this because I so dreaded not having any more of it to draw out. Peter and Ivan each represent a shade of misogyny, of straight white man ism in modern society that doesn't forgive itself even while it refuses to let you ignore their own humanity and histories. Peter's perspective, made up of brief Ulyssian phrases and stunning descriptions, varies as much from Ivan's terminally introspective one as the 2 brothers do from each other. Rooney's past books have focused on waxing and waning romantic and semi-romantic relationships. Beautiful World also features a platonic one at its core. This one takes as its subject siblings, at first nearly estranged, as they struggle toward each other. Anyway, I often hate multiple perspectives because it always feels there's one the author is more comfortable with, that the choice to distinguish the 2 is because they have to be different because they're different characters. Rooney's decision is deliberate, each perspective difference thought out, and because of that both are wildly impressive. I loved this book. Bottom line, all the It girls love intermezzo and all the It girls are right. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to the publisher for the arc, buddy read of a lifetime with my favorite girl. Closing parenthesis.